Nico Rattazzi, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Benson crew reunite.
Benson Crew Unites. Okay, so this was going to be the first thing I wanted to talk to you about. I
Uh,
think, look, I was on Woe. You were not a Woe person, but you were the first friend I made sans Woe. Do you remember when we met?
was that 601?
No. Oh, I'm so glad you don't know this.
My guess would have been the 601, but I also do remember the. Oh no, that was the second year. No, I don't. I don't precisely remember, but I think
We
if you
met
start,
August 25th, 2005. I'll tell you why I know the date. Because I made mention out loud in Benson that I had all this music on my iPod
yeah,
that I didn't know how to get onto my laptop.
I remember this.
And you overheard me say that out loud. You, being the generous person that you are, were like, "Hey, let me help you." You used some program called Sanuti, which is iTunes backwards. I
Yeah,
remember this,
I do remember
and
doing
you
that.
got all my music from my iPod onto my laptop. And then for the rest of eternity, because it'd say like date added in iTunes,
Right.
August 25th, 2005. And so the first thing we bonded over was music. And I will forever be grateful for you helping me make playlists on my iTunes in college.
Cemented in infamy. Look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, man, we were part of the original Benson crew.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I always think about the people who were in the dorm at that time. It was like the
Yeah.
Adam and Kestrel, and then Simon. And so I actually I now it's funny because I think about it of the people, and I will see like their dorm room and the floor that they're on. Like I almost feel like
Yeah.
it's like a snapshot. Like I could look at like different paintings of people in their
Yeah.
dorm doing their usual activity kind of thing. It's funny.
Yeah. You must have been, you were first floor Benson.
Yeah.
And I know you were the opposite side as me. You must have been like 101.
I want to say it was like 105 or something. I don't know how the
Okay.
numbering worked, but it's funny
Yeah.
because I ended up staying in that room because this is like such the technical mindset, which is it was considered the largest square foot room of that dorm, and so I was like,
Oh,
I
really?
like my roommate, I like this room,
Yeah.
and so I was kind of like that mid South Quad for life kind of mentality.
Yeah. How did you find out about the Claremont schools and what brought you to Claremont?
It's a great question. So my high school, I came from a very small high school where graduating class was like 303. But I mean, it's not like
Okay.
pastoral, like 13 kids small kind of thing. But
Yeah. Yeah.
the they would have people come in and like provide like a road show almost. So like our
Yeah.
we had college counselors, we had two, and then
Yeah.
there'd be rotational colleges, and so there'd be this bulletin board that's like these colleges are kind of coming. And Claremont stood out because it was like, hey, there's like five colleges and you can do different expertise across it. And like I was getting technical, but I also felt like I wasn't an entirely classic, like, technical person. And so I
Yeah.
was like, okay, let's hear this guy out. I'm trying to remember what the guy's name was. He was like a kind of like this big pasty looking dude.
Did you do an overnight when you were a high school senior?
Yes, with Brad Walters.
Oh, you're kidding.
Which is a great person to have because it felt
Yeah,
like
for
he was like
sure.
when like 10 things I hate about you, and it's like you're walking through and they're like, hey, that's this guy and that guy, and then they're thinking of things like this and da. So like he knew all
Uh,
that stuff, so it was like a
yeah.
perfect kind of like tour and all that.
Yeah, shout out Brad Walters. That's a great, what, like, hard to devise a better person to be your freshman host as a high school senior. Uh what do you remember from your visit?
um I remember it's funny because like there was this like high school feels fairly performative, whereas college, I
Yeah.
feel like it's a little more aloof. Like people are getting into kind of like their segment. So when you're
Yeah.
asking, as a high schooler, you're like, oh, hey, like, are you like, and these are like, I don't know, it's like I'm trying to figure it
Yeah.
out. And so I felt like it was like less prepared, but more candid. But I think that's
Yeah.
ultimately the majority of the transition. Cause like, my high school was like, their like tagline is like Silicon Valley's high school. And like we had the
Yeah.
dude who took the most APs in the United States. And like we
Really?
had like, yeah, like people like if you think about like the Kevin G mathletes of like Mean Girls, like we
Yeah.
had like the people who were getting recognized on a national level and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I felt like it was a lot more relaxed. And then I think what I liked was it did feel very Lord of the Rings, where it's like each school kind of felt different, but then like
Yeah.
I had technical stuff that I wanted to do, but I also wanted to kind of like see if econ was right. And then I took econ
Yeah.
50 and I'm like, fuck this, I'm just gonna do CS.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's really amazing. So you then obviously came to Claremont, and you kind of became the like computer guy, for lack of a better thing, right? Like you were what was the dorm
RTA.
computer person? RTA. Thank
Yeah.
you. You
And
became
it's
ASCMC's CTO. Sorry, I interrupted.
yeah, no. It's so funny what I was gonna say. And actually I don't even think I became a CMCT. Like I always wanted to be
Oh,
like the
really?
lead RTA and I never got that job.
Oh man.
And I felt so burned by it too because I was just like
Yeah.
poured my heart and soul. But truth be told, like table stakes, like RTA, what I loved was moving in early and getting all of like
Yeah.
my stuff kind of like in order, getting to meet the new kind of students coming in, because then it's
Yeah.
just kind of like, oh, I'm understanding the culture of the dorm as it's changing. Because I was Benson 3 years, so like I felt
Yeah.
like I was starting to become a little bit the mayor there. And then the other side of it was that like it paid fairly well. It was like 350
Yeah.
bucks a month, and that all went to like weed and alcohol. And I
Really?
couldn't have been
Oh my god, that's amazing.
yeah.
Dude,
And I mean, like, think
$350 a month.
now.
Are they still hiring?
Yeah, exactly. It's like 350 bucks a month for just like Googling like how to set up a printer. Now, truth be told, like I've
Totally.
been doing IT stuff for like old
Yeah,
ladies in my parents' apartment for a long time, but
sure, sure.
yeah.
Um, man, that's amazing. It's always so fun to me to think back to like that era. And this podcast slash videocast has been a great like conduit to that. But I want to, uh, for those like listening, I feel like of all the people I've kept in touch with in 2005, I may have kept in best touch with you. And so I know everything. I don't want to say everything, but I know most things that are happening in your life.
I think you know everything.
For those who maybe aren't as aware, can you talk me through like what has your life been like post graduation?
I mean, a lot of ups and downs, I would say, and a lot of transitions, I feel like. And,
Yeah,
I've always weighed like a professional part of me as a big part of my identity. But the
yeah.
other thing that's nuts is that if you were to ask me at CMC what my number one goal is in life, I would tell you it would have been to be a dad. And so I now have
Quick
a
time out.
yeah.
I have two flashbulb memories of us probably last week of August 2005. One is you helping me with my laptop, and two is you saying, I think the thing I like want to become is a dad. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing I like want. And so as long as I've known you, this is exactly what you've said.
Yeah, it's the Italian nature. I got ragu in my bloodstream. I can't help it. I just want to like have all these kids running around and like watching them grow and doing all that.
Yeah. Well, walk me through post graduation to like where you are today, and maybe share some of the highlights and some of the lowlights if you're comfortable.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, like I was saying, so recent dad, and a lot of that stuff happened fairly kind of quickly, where it's like, my wife today, we actually know each other from high school. Very long story of through kind of like decades of like being close friends, and then like having to travel and the what do they kind of like say, where it's like the stars didn't align until
Yeah.
the right point, but then it was like we started dating in like 2018, and then we got engaged and married in 2021, moved in
Yeah.
together, had a baby, kind of like et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But like I identify a lot with kind of like the professional side, and I got very lucky out of college. And my parents actually always say like, you probably would have been better off if you hadn't gotten lucky up front, because it
Sure.
makes a lot of things harder down the line. But ultimately, it's like, yeah, I joined a startup that got bought by Google, was at Google for a long time, and then was kind of trying to figure out what to do next. I joined a company that does apartment rentals and
Yeah.
joined them, wanted to be an engineering manager, got to do that, transitioned into product, built product and design teams, and then started getting more into growth and data. My current company, they're a marketplace for heavy equipment rentals where I run product and design. But I'm now realizing like the growth and the data side to me is really interesting. So I'm starting
Mm.
to kind of like slightly pivot, I think, in my last realm there, but really trying to kind of navigate that. I think, look, to anyone who hears my voice right now, who is unemployed looking for a job, the market today is, I think, harder than when we graduated in 2009. And I think the reason
Yeah,
for
I
that,
agree.
aside from the macro trends, is because like the supply and demand is so off kilter that certain positions aren't even being posted publicly because it's easier to get referrals, it's easier to work through recommendations versus like culling through hundreds of resumes. And I think that's fairly common, not just across tech, but across a lot of different areas. But anywho, that's TLDR.
You know, it's interesting you compare to the '09 market. On every single episode that I've filmed so far, the fact that like when we graduated in the market, the state of the market when we graduated has come up on every episode. And you know, it's honestly it's something that I think about not infrequently. Like it left a dent on me, you know what I mean? And I think it left a dent on everyone of like I don't want to say playing scared, I wouldn't say that, but like we started our career with like a little bit of a wound, honestly, you know, and
Sure.
we were lucky to have emerged from it. And we were probably in a good position to be in that because, like, if you're ever going to be struggling to find a job, maybe 21, 22 is the best time, certainly better than being like 50, I would imagine, you know?
Yeah, and
Um,
it's funny. I remember like when I used to talk to people at 2009, I was like, yeah, it took me 4 months to find a job and it was so grueling. Like, and I had to live with my parents and I was complaining. I look at that person now and I'm just like, you wuss, like, you have no idea what's coming. I mean, like, my last
yeah,
job probably took around, easily more than 4 months. And then my current
yeah,
search, has now been like 6 months. I'm still employed.
yeah,
I've been looking.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, I'm looking, right? And I'm like trying to dive into projects myself on some of this stuff. And it's really hard.
Yeah,
It's really, really hard.
yeah,
And it's also really like humbling, you know? And it's amazing. Like actually I got to give one quick shout out. Uh I came across a job online and I like clicked on, people who work at this company and it was Katie Hunkler. So shout out to Katie Hunkler. And dude, she got back to me right away and who knows if I'm going to get the job or not, right?
yeah.
But like you end up being so grateful to these people who do these little acts of help, you know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Yeah,
And and I think Claremont's a great community to kind of help foster that because it's small, so you know everybody. It's not like I know Katie kind of well, you know.
yeah.
It's not like we were best friends in college, but we like would hang out, and I can certainly text her and not feel weird about it. But yeah, man, this economy is tough, really tough.
Yeah, and like of course team seers always want to help and like I had a wonderful period I think when I was like, just off of the high of the success, moving into Zumper, starting to see the success in the transition, but like haven't really achieved any of the success um that I saw early on in the career. But I remember that era was like I want to help as many CMCers as possible because now my philosophy
Yeah,
is like I can't even help myself. Like how could I even help other CMCers? But of course, if anyone were to reach out, like I had Miles Bird reach out for an intro this morning to their
yeah.
fund and all that stuff. But like always want to be able to kind of like help out and reach out. But I'd be very curious to hear like for example, like is there anyone at at the Claremont colleges who works at like OpenAI and what their DMs look like now? Like they must be like
I'm sure.
drowning. Yeah.
They must be drowning. They
Yeah.
must be drowning. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, well, this is interesting because even if there's been some change sort of professionally, I think that like personally for you, you are in sort of rare company insofar as you've been in one city, SF,
Yeah.
the entire time since you've graduated.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so maybe talk to me about how like you've seen San Francisco change. You're also from the Bay Area, so you probably have a unique perspective on this.
Yeah, and I think my Bay Area roots run super deep, and I think that's true.
Yeah,
And hardcore across the board. I mean, but yeah, San Francisco has changed, and I think that like the hardest, I think for me personally, was the exodus of people who left as San Francisco started to get rough. I think it's still a pretty rough city with a lot of problems that they need to work through. But as people were starting to move to like the Austins and Miami stuff about like call it 5 years ago, I think that was the hardest for me, losing a lot of those friends. I mean, I don't know
yeah,
if the city will ever recover, but like I feel like my roots are here. Will I eventually move? I don't know. I
yeah,
have to talk to my wife about, you know, thinking about the priorities for the kids, priorities for us, and the networks we want to be around.
yeah,
But yeah, it's like we'll see.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, you and I used to live like a block from each other
Yeah,
in SF, and like there was for those that don't know, you lived at 21st in Valencia. I lived on Hill Street. It's like maybe a block and a
It's a
half from
half a
each other,
block,
but
technically
it's
half
half
a
a
block.
block. Yeah, it's really close. And we would meet up on the corner to go meet friends for a drink or whatever. And the corner of 21st and Valencia to me is like, you may as well bronze it, because to me, that's like our corner. And
Mhm.
I have to say, for years, man, those were some of my favorite memories in my post college life, of like meeting you in the corner, going out to a party or some CMCer's house, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's a concrete front porch for sure of like where
Concrete
we
front
would go
porch.
off. Yeah, I agree.
Um, well, I'd love to talk about maybe let's take the Wayback Machine
Sure.
and talk about some superlatives with respect to Claremont. What was your favorite class at Claremont? And by the way, multiple answers are allowed.
Yeah, and so it's funny because like I always give. So generally, I if someone says what was your favorite class in college, I give the UI course at Harvey Mudd. But I'm not going to talk about that because we're not talking about Harvey Mudd today. No, we're talking about CMC. But for CMC, actually, it was the logic course because
Oh,
I
cool.
didn't really like I knew concepts of logic, but like I didn't know like, hey, you're going into the realm of logic as a material. And that ended up
Yeah.
being like one of my like best grades in college. And like if you know
Yeah.
me, like I'm usually not someone who gets good grades. I've been more like applicative versus theoretical. And
Sure.
so to me, that was like a moment where I was just like, wow, like this concept existed way before I think like the age of computing, which is like, pretty basic of me to say, of course, and kind of inspired those kind of like the evolution. But to me, just like, I feel like that class later allowed me to become it's like not only just setting the fundamentals for engineering but actually like discourse and
Yeah.
conversation. And it's not about like I don't get joy of proving people wrong, but like I love driving consensus. Like it's just the classic
Uh,
product manager thing, which is like
yeah.
super lame. Like I can like hear the tech people's like eyes rolling out of their head as I'm like saying this stuff because it's just like tech buzzword bingo. But like the truth is like if you're using logic to kind of like take different pieces and rules together and then simplifying that, which was exercises through this course I learned, like
Yeah.
that to me was like, I really enjoy this. And I didn't draw that connection then. I was like, oh, clearly I'm an engineer, so I like this. But actually, I'm
Yeah.
realizing there's a part of it in the soft skills that's really applicable.
That is really interesting and really insightful, because I would have agreed with what you just said, in that logic feels so cold and not like, I love logic too, but it's like because it's cold,
Yeah.
you know? And I hear you. Like, to drive consensus and whatnot, you can use some of these, like, logos logic skills,
Yeah.
right? So that's a really good answer. Was at Claremont,
Yeah,
not like
it was. It was in
Pomona? Wow.
Bauer. I remember who taught it. It was this lady, but I do remember, yeah, it was in the Bauer basement.
Yeah, cool. Um so then this begs the question, who is your favorite professor?
I mean, Artley, because like he taught CS, and I got to give credit to the guy because like when you connect with the old school tech people, like they all have this kind
Yeah.
of common thread amongst them. But like, look, like see, like so to give context in that era, I was one of three CS majors at Claremont,
Yeah.
which is insane to think
Who
about.
who were the other two? It was John Sloat.
John Sloat, and then the other guy was, oh man, I feel horrible not remembering his name. But like he was the one that just like kind of went on his own path, hung out with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And so we're like, sayonara. And I was like, John, you want to
Yeah.
be best friends? And then like we went
Yeah,
through
right.
kind of like the trenches together. But the uh but yeah, it's just like it was just three of us. And so we had to kind of like
Yeah.
determine, are we taking this at Pomona? Are we taking it at Harvey Mudd? What are we taking through CMC? CMC was starting to do classes. So to Art Lee's testament, he did this web programming course, and it was Java servlet programming. And
Yeah.
no one used Java servlet programming unless you were like going to like an old school like tech company. And because they didn't
Yeah.
update their like web like infrastructure and like technologies. And so like I actually learned how to do modern web programming, which was like PHP, MySQL through Scott Ashford in the dorms, and that landed me my first job. But Art Lee,
Wow.
though, like we would talk to him about this stuff, and he's like, this stuff is older, but it's fundamentals, and knowing this stuff is helpful, and he's right. And so you can kind of
Yeah.
see and understand the trade offs there. But he was just super down, chill guy, and like really he understood that. So he wasn't hard pressed in his ways. He just really knew that there were kids, technology, the promise of technology. It's just what he was teaching
Yeah.
us a little out.
Yeah. That's a great answer. And it's crazy because I bet you now the Claremont, first of all, I think it was a sequence when we were at Claremont. I'm not even sure if it was a sequence, honestly.
The sequence, no, it was being developed as I got more
Yeah.
senior. So like for example, like I think Alex Berman and some other of like the younger classes got into that sequence realm.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. But
Yeah.
I was a solid major at that point.
Yeah. Um, it's crazy because I bet you half the kids today, if not more, probably at Claremont, we could probably find this out. John Ferranda could tell us or something. I bet you half of them take CS courses.
One of the statistics I heard was that 1 in 4 CMC students take a CS course. I bet you, and
Wow.
that was like I think 4 years ago or 5 years ago when
Wow.
they were
Yeah.
revamping. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty
That's
wild.
crazy.
Mm.
Okay. So switching from academia to something more fun, what was your favorite CMC party?
So I
Or I should say, what was your favorite Claremont party? I won't restrict you just to CMC parties.
So here is what's tricky, and I'm going to be honest about this because this is the way I think about it, is that the first thing that comes to my mind is most memorable versus favorite.
Okay.
And I think there's a
Yeah,
difference
sure.
because
There is a
memorable
difference.
for me, which is like foam party, slippery when wet, Wild Wild West, which respectively had
Wild Wild
like,
West. Wow.
which
Great,
had, which
great
had
shout out to Wild Wild West.
Shout out Wild Wild West because they had respectively preposterous stories of like, really ridiculous things that you witness people doing sexually, really
Yeah.
ridiculous for me instances because it was my first time doing mushrooms, and then really ridiculous because I rode the electric bull 3 times, blacked out, and then woke up in a random Scripsy apartment with a letter from Kestrel saying, hey, you are in my girlfriend's apartment, I've set aside water for you, and I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's memorable. But it's funny
That
because
is
like
memorable.
favorite for me would have been like across the 4 years, what's the party that um, you know, was like a very strong kind of like thing where it's like you kind of had to. And I think that like
Yeah.
601 definitely provides like that memory
601
as
is my
well.
answer. Yeah, totally.
Just because I feel like it is like the staple. It's like the cornerstone. Um,
Yeah.
White Party came out a little bit for
Oh,
me
yeah.
because like, I like any opportunity to class it up. And so ultimately I think that like my true to myself, I think Guido answer would be Monte Carlo. And I think the reason for that is because
Hmm.
that one was like the classing it up, the gambling, and like it just felt like you were kind of like time warped a little bit into
Yeah.
a different environment. And so I think that one I think it was just kind of cool and different. And it's not your classic rager; it's a little different.
No. Yeah, actually you're the first person to mention Monte Carlo, but it's a great call because it was sort of like it's almost prom meets some sort of James Bondy fall party. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like
And
it's a hard established event.
yeah. Yeah. And it was a tradition and it definitely was fancier, right? To speak to your like getting dressed up kind of vibe. That's a really, really good answer. That's a really good answer.
I appreciate it.
Talk to me about your favorite CMC memory. And multiple answers are allowed. And I know it's really hard. So if you're just like, here's a bunch of memories, I'll accept that too.
That is hard. One of the things that stands out, I would say to me, I think about certain ways that I met people similar to you,
Yeah,
where it's like having met, Isaiah and some other people, like that the specific
sure.
moments. But the
Shout
one
out
thing,
Isaiah, of
shout out
course.
Isaiah, of course, always. The thing that kind of jumps out to me is so I ran for class president senior year against
Yes.
Naomi, who was always gonna slaughter me, and I always knew that. But I wanted to run, um,
Yeah.
and so I think like seeing that like support from my
Mm,
friends and like uh, I would have never wanted to kind of like divide things or things like that, but it was just fun to see that level of support. And it was funny later where
yeah.
it's like years later, John Sloat like wore like to my birthday the shirt that says Nico for Prez, which was these shirts that we got
Oh,
made.
that's amazing.
And so it's funny to see that like that thread because I feel like that was one of the things where it's like I decided to put myself out there and see
Yeah.
people show up and support me. I think that was always like very pleasant.
Yeah.
So
That's a
I
great
think,
answer.
yeah, I think that would be it.
It sounds like you were about to say something else as well.
I know it's the thing I was thinking about was just like it's so funny to think through like I was so like I was like oh I wish I had won and things like that and I think throughout life there's a lot of things where it's like hey I was hoping really for this outcome but it's funny when you look back on it you remember I think more so like the journey's more the
Yeah.
destination I think so
Yeah.
it was just funny just to think about that where it's like less about the result and more about the experience.
The path to get there.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, because we were in the same freshman dorm, there's just so many memories that I have of with you, I should say.
yeah,
Like playing Call of Duty on like back then I remember being like a big screen TV, but if you see pictures of it, it's like it's smaller than the monitor that I'm on right now,
totally.
and it's
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
wow. Or of course, the iTunes, you helping me out with that. Um, and I know this is like kind of cheating here, but I also just want those who are listening. This is not a Claremont memory, but you and I have become in a Claremont fantasy football league, and you win every seemingly every year, if not every other year. Um, and that's been a real fantasy football has been a happy memory for me post graduation, but I need to respect the rightful king of our fantasy league and just let everybody know your complete dominance in that as well.
I appreciate that. And for those also, yeah, who don't know, what's ridiculous is that so I've won 4 times over like 10 years, which is the most, but
Damn, that is crazy.
crazy. The funny part of it for me is that every time I win, I write a fake article. Of the three, I wrote a fake article of where I'm being interviewed by a hypothetical kind of person. But then the most recent win, I actually did a podcast where I pretended to be an Italian dude named Guido who was hired by me to interview the members of the league and to do an episode
Yes.
honoring my victory, which is a ridiculous, preposterous thing. But I had so much fun because ultimately it's like I feel like I've been able to take gloating to the next level where I have these
No,
hypothetical
it's
like
great.
articles and podcasts
It's
about me winning, but it's just numbers.
it's great. It's really great. I know everyone in the league loves it, so I needed to just put you on blast for that real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a reunion episode, of course. Tell me who you're still in touch with. I probably have a decent sense, but I'd love to hear from you. Who you're still in touch with, and maybe some people you want to give some shout outs to.
Oh wow. I always think of it as like eras almost, where
Yeah,
it's like there was the early Benson crew era, which was like you
yeah,
and Simon, and then it's like kind of like open to Adam Sherman, Kestrel, Thomas
yeah.
Spiller.
Shout out Adam Sherman and
Yeah,
Kestrel. Hell yeah,
yeah, and so like that era, and then it was like getting into computer science. It was like Scott Ashford, John
mm,
Slow,
mm,
and then there was yeah some of the Pomona people in there. And then later in college, I feel like when the younger kind of like students started coming in, it was more of like the Hunter, Eric Scott, and like more of the people
yeah,
who were getting on the like the ASCMC side, like Isaiah and stuff. So
yeah,
I know I keep in fair touch with a lot of those guys as well,
yeah,
and then of course, yeah, in the fantasy league, it's like yeah, Tejas and Ren Berber. So yeah, it's
yeah,
kind of a real random smattering, and I feel like it's like orbits that come in and out depending on kind of where I am and what I'm thinking about.
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna give one quick shout out because this person was in Benson with us, uh, and I haven't talked to her in forever. But Heidi Denenholtz.
I was actually going to mention, I haven't spoken to her in a while either, but
Yeah,
of the memorable experience, there is an experience of me singing Under the Sea with Simon and Heidi. And I
yeah,
blasted it on the speakers. It was like a random like TNC night or something.
yeah,
And so that one, it's funny, like I'll always bring that up with Simon, but I think yeah, Heidi and Sarah were both there, and
yeah.
it's funny because I then performed that at my wedding because we did a karaoke party. So
Oh,
it's so
that's
funny
right.
the full circle of all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Heidi. Yeah, she's great.
The crazy thing, it's funny. I didn't know that story about you and Heidi and Simon singing that at Claremont. Something that's become abundantly clear to me, and I've said it. I'm saying it in this episode. I've said it in previous episodes. Um, people haven't changed.
Yeah.
Like they have changed, of course. Like you're a father now, like that's very different from when you were at Claremont, of course. But like fundamentally, their personalities are kind of the same,
Yeah.
And I mean that in the most beautiful way,
Oh,
right?
totally.
Like if you were
Yeah.
singing Under the Sea in 2005, you also happen to sing it at your wedding, and it's such a cool thing to see. Um, okay, so the final question that I'll ask, because I'm hoping that people reach out to you who listen to this and
Yeah.
want to give you a shout out. Finish this sentence. Someone should slide into my DMs to chat about
Humor, honestly. Like I actually would say, like, this is one of the things that I've been kind of realizing. It's like, I really optimized on like profession, you know,
Yeah,
and that was really key for me. And like I was like, I'm not going to do study abroad. I'm going to work on my computers and graduate and blah, blah. And then it was like, of course I had the vision into family and like really wanted to start a family. But like as I look at my life and I was like, if I was in the terms that you use, like if I was a man of leisure and
yeah,
like in the full embrace, I really do believe that one of the things that I've consistently enjoyed and I feel like brings profound value and meaning to my life has been humor and like and uniting around humor and the
yeah.
dimensions of it and what make people laugh and stuff and so to me it's just like, hey, if you saw this and you laughed about it or something, or you want to tell me of a random memory that you have, please tell me because if you make me laugh, I'll make you laugh right back for sure.
It's funny you mentioned this because I remember I don't remember whose dorm room, but I was with you, and this had to have been like sophomore year, I want to say. And you showed me Daniel Tosh. And this was like before he was anybody, right?
Yeah.
Before a show, whatever. And I always I feel like you're always very up to date on content, whether it's albums or shows or stand-up comedians or whatnot. So very happy that people can reach out to you about comedy
I
or
was actually
anything like
thinking
that.
about that, where it was like we would just find these video clips of like these underground comedians. Like I was thinking Russell
Yeah.
Peters as well was a
Oh,
big one,
sure.
Daniel Tosh, and then Pablo Francisco, which is like
Sure.
Simon and I's spirit animal and humor.
Yeah.
Like it's funny because like those were comedy specials that then grew into the careers of like these funny people.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was such a big thing of like watching
Yeah.
random comedy specials with people.
It's also crazy because we're talking about this and I'm like, wow, this was obviously between 2005 and 2009. That was in some ways, I feel like peak internet
Oh,
because
totally. Yeah,
things
we talked
hadn't
about
become so centralized yet.
yeah.
And you could actually find really crazy stuff. And it was almost before things really went viral because like Facebook was so new that we were there when it didn't even have a damn news feed. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like,
yeah, and we couldn't sign up till sophomore year, and then it was like,
no, freshman year. We could sign up freshman
oh,
year,
freshman year. You're right.
but we couldn't have it. I remember being about to go to college, not having a .edu email address, and all my friends who were going to other schools
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I was like so out of the party. It was heartbreaking.
Yeah, and then so we were trolling like E-Bombs World and
Yeah.
all of these random ass sites,
Yeah.
Newgrounds, and like, you're the man
Yeah.
now, dog. So it's like
Yeah, exactly.
there was the old kind of like guard of like this content because YouTube, yeah, was 2006, I think 2007. So
Yeah. 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 Well, Nico, always a pleasure catching up. This was a blast. People should reach out to you on humor and sounds like just about anything else, and I'm hoping people do. And thanks for taking the time to catch up.
no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.